Afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, and welcome. I'm so excited that you're joining us for this month's Coloring the Conversation. As you can see and you saw from our social media, our topic this week is In This Together. Navigating perinatal mood disorders as a couple. And you all, I have some special guests. First of all, let me tell you who I am because I'm too excited. I want to get started. I'm Andrea Clark Horton. I am the director of the Perinatal Mental Health Alliance for People of Color with Postpartum Support International. And I am so excited to have with me today Lisette and Christopher Rose. Is Lopez Rose?
I'm Lopez Rose. He's Rose.
Lopez Rose. I'm so excited to have them with us. I'm not going to say who, but somebody refers to Chris and Lisette as the first couple of PSI. And so we are delighted to have them with us. I'm going to let them take us a minute to introduce themselves to you. And then we're going to jump into our conversation. I think this is really going to be rich today. So, Lisette, why don't you start? Tell us who you are.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Lisette. I am the PSI Support Group's online program assistant. So I do all the support groups, kind of my hand in all the support groups that are offered by PSI. And I also am a volunteer with PSI as a support coordinator in California. We live outside of San Francisco here in California. And I'm also going to be newly introduced to the board of directors for the PSI California chapter. So I'm going to be the peer support chair, which is really exciting. So based off of everything I just said, I'm like knee deep in PSI, and I'm just like so, into PSI. I facilitate the PSI Latinx support group, which is really exciting to help launch that. And I've been with PSI for a year now as an employee, but prior to that, I was a help seeker. So I found PSI support groups, and that's kind of just how I became familiar with PSI. And I've been with the Alliance as well. I signed up with the Alliance a year ago as well when I became an employee.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, you are knee deep, man. You're knee deep. And what about, is this your lovely husband, Chris?
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris. I have been with PSI in total for since 2021 as well. I started out as a help seeker, and that slowly transitioned me into becoming a volunteer facilitator with the dads groups. There was a lack of support groups for dads. We had one once a month, and plus the phone call that they have once a month as well. And I reached out and was able to kind of help facilitate another group. And now I'm glad that I can say we have 4 groups a month now for the dads instead of just the one. So we have 4 every Friday. There's a group for dads. So it's an amazing feeling to know that as PSI is growing, so are all of these groups.
Yeah, that is so
and I'm a peer mentor as well. Yes.
You're a peer mentor too?
Yes.
For dads?
For dads, yes.
For dads and male partners. That is so amazing. And I think it's one of the things that I also love about PSI. And Chris, we'll get into that a little bit later, just about how sometimes we, on this journey, we forget, that there are dads that need support as well, right? And that men do experience perinatal mood disorders as well. And so I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit. But what I want to start out first is we want to know about you guys. Like, tell us a little bit about you. I mean, PSI didn't bring you together, right? So we can't lay claim to that. But like, tell us a little bit about how you met, about your love story.
Yeah, so we've been together for almost 12 years.
12 years.
Okay. And so we met online through a dating app back in 2011.
Okay.
And we've been married for, is it 5 years now?
5, right? 5 years, yes.
Yep, we've been married for 5 years now, and we have a 2.5-year-old daughter named Sybil. Yeah, do you want to add anything?
No, I think as everybody else went through like the pandemic and everything like that, Lisette and I, we made a lot of, life-changing decisions during that time. We bought a house and we found out we were having a baby at the same time.
Oh,
And I will definitely say that was an experience of trying to start building your home plus having a baby and things like that was very, very stressful. But yeah, throughout the 12 years it's been an amazing journey that we've both explored how to understand each other more, and I think that's really the case, and how to better our communication with each other. We're growing every day, and
yeah.
that's the magical part of it, I would say.
We love to hear that. That is a whole lot at one time. Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
finish, home, baby. Are you both from California?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that was the easy part. It wasn't like a distance
Yeah.
coast
No.
to
No.
coast type of thing. And I have to say, I don't know what's happened between 2011 and 2023 on these dating apps, but honey, they not it today. Okay, that's all I'm
No,
saying.
we got very lucky. I knew right away after our first date. I knew right away that I was going to marry her. Like
Oh,
I just knew it, and I'm very blessed, and I'm very thankful for you know the life I have right now.
yeah, I love that. Listen, did you know it after the first date?
Well, I think so. Kind of early on, because I think at the beginning we were both very like into or wanting like a long-term
Mhm.
relationship. Like we were just really ready to start a long-term relationship, and so both of us had that mentality, which I think worked out great. But then I was also wondering because I was like, is he Latino or is he not Latino? Because he looks like he is, but he's actually not. And so I learned more about his story. He's biracial, so his mom's white, his dad's black. And so, that didn't factor into any of my decision, but I just like when I got to know him more in that sense about, who he is, where he comes from, that's where I really like appreciated him more and just really was like, yeah, this is the one. I think it's the one.
Oh well, okay. I'm glad you said that. I thought I, and that's part of the continual work that I think that we all have to do, even as folks of color, because
Mhm.
I thought you were Latino as well, Chris.
Okay. Growing up in the Bay Area, and especially like where we grew up, it's a very heavy Latino community. I grew up in a small town outside of San Francisco, and I got it all the time. And I don't mind it. It was weird, like growing up, where people thought I was somebody else, and like they would talk to me, and I'm like, I don't, sorry, that's not me. I don't know who that is. And
Uh,
so it was fine. Like it wasn't like I never like was angry at it. I always
hmm.
thought, I always took it as I took it as it came, and it was never a big deal to me. But you know, I'm just thankful for the family that I do have. They're my rock. Um,
Yeah,
my my family's embedded in the Bay Area, and we just they're they shaped me to be the man I am today.
I love it. I love it. So you talked a little bit about how you met, and we know you have you said 2.5-year-old daughter.
Mhm.
So tell me about how did perinatal mood disorders enter your family story?
So I would say like there's two ways I can really answer that. One is, what happened and how we realized what we were experiencing. And then also like looking back, how it actually goes further back
Yeah.
into our pregnancy. So it started with, I think Sybil was 6 months, and I was 6 months postpartum, and all my symptoms were kind of minimized by my providers, including her providers, like the pediatrician, the lactation consultants, because I was struggling with breastfeeding. She wasn't latching, and so that was a struggle. And so all of that kind of just built up, I think. And the main symptom I was experiencing was rage. I think it's funny because people say that Latinas are hotheads, that they're just very like outspoken and stuff, which is true because I am kind of like that.
Yes.
But I think just I'm talking about like Hulk rage, like I was ready to break things, like, and that's actually a symptom of postpartum depression. And I wasn't there in the corner crying my eyes out, so it just didn't look that way for me, and so I didn't recognize it, and my providers weren't recognizing it; they just kept minimizing it, as it's an adjustment. And so finally, that's kind of where I found PSI. I was just like, something's wrong. I need help. I tried to get therapy, but there was a whole wait list because of the pandemic. And so as I was waiting for therapy, that's kind of how I found PSI and just felt immediately validated that I was experiencing something real. And my symptom was something true. It was not just a random adjustment symptom. But when I look back, I really see that during my pregnancy, because we actually found out we were pregnant the week, I think, that San Francisco shut down for the pandemic. So I like to say that we're pandemic first-time parents because we went through an entire pregnancy and a whole postpartum experience in the thick of 2020 when all of the anxiety around COVID existed. And so when I look back at, our experience, I can really tell that like I was having perinatal depression symptoms already, even perinatal OCD symptoms. And I was really having a tough time because, he wasn't allowed to come into my appointments. We never held hands for an appointment to see our daughter. We never got to enjoy those things. And so that, that just really affected us.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I had to see and hear my daughter's first heartbeats over my phone. And that's where it starts, is that like my depression started, like I wanted to be in the room. I had expectations. I had dreams of being in the room, as a kid, not as a kid, but like as you get older, you have these thoughts of like, I want to be in the room with my wife, holding her hand and stroking her hair, giving her a kiss, crying together for the first time, right? After you see your baby's heartbeat and you see them on the ultrasound. And I had to sit on my phone and look at it through FaceTime. And and really it's hard because it's like they put you on the spot to say like, oh, do you have any questions? It's like, no, I don't have any questions. I can't even think right now. I'm happy and I'm sad at the same time. And so we weren't able to kind of fully digest what was going on. Like we knew we were having a child and we knew that, we wanted to be safe about it because the pandemic was, it's not anything to take lightly. And so we were very careful, but at the same time, it was extremely hard for us to kind of understand what we were going through at that time. So, and it was a very, very emotional time for us.
And then I should also add that like when I joined PSI groups and I was learning about symptoms, I also learned that dads can experience and partners can experience depression and anxiety as well. And so that's kind of how I explained it to my husband, because I was like, oh, you know what? I'm actually seeing like some of the stuff that I'm learning from these groups. I'm starting to see some of the symptoms that you're showing. And so I kind of, encouraged him to go to the dad's group, to go to parents group. And so like, that's how he himself got himself, recovered and healed and involved.
Yeah.
So Lisette, when you found PSI, was it just, you say you tried, the providers were minimizing your symptoms, but you knew you didn't feel like yourself.
Yeah.
You tried to find counseling, but the wait lists were so long. So were you just Googling, or how did you find PSI? Had somebody told you about PSI?
No, I just did a social media check or search on Instagram. So I knew like while I was waiting for a therapist, I was just like, there's just something wrong. Like, I don't know what's wrong. So I just looked up postpartum support, and that's how I found PSI on Instagram.
Wonderful. That's amazing. And so it's really, I'm so glad that you're sharing your story today. And I think that one of the things that we forget, I remember I worked in a hospital. I was a hospital chaplain all during the pandemic, and prior to that, but during the pandemic, and my units were the mother baby units. And so I remember like that isolation of that experience, right, of partners not being able to be present for a lot of those things. And so, which was hard on the partners and on the birthing people, on the moms, because, that is an experience you like to share. So do you feel like that separation, that isolation that happened, like during the process of the pregnancy, do you feel like that compounded some of what you were feeling?
Totally.
Chris?
Absolutely. It, unfortunately, Liz had to go to, we said it, sorry, I call her Liz as a Unfortunately, Lisette had to go to the emergency room twice during the pregnancy, and that was the only time I was allowed to go into the room with her. And it's not a fun feeling because we don't know what was going on. Thankfully there was nothing wrong, everything was normal, and we were just experiencing normalcy through the pregnancy. But still, like, I'm all the way in Richmond, California, she's in San Francisco, and I have to figure out how to get to San Francisco. I don't know what's going on, and I'm trying to like rush there. And thankfully, like I said, everything was fine, but it was still that was the only time I was allowed to go into the room with her. And luckily at that time we got to hear our daughter's heartbeat, which was the most wonderful sound in the world, and it still is the most wonderful sound in the world to me. um but that was the only time that we got to be together in the room at the same time and look at our daughter, you know our daughter's ultrasound. And so
Yeah.
it definitely hurt. And on top of that, like once Lisette actually had our child, we were rushed out of the hospital right afterwards. Like we Lisette went into labor, was it Friday night?
No, I had to get induced.
Oh, induced. But our daughter was born Saturday morning, we were home Sunday afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And so like there's no amount of questions, like we're still adjusting to like this whole process that just happened, the whole birth, everything, making sure Lisette's okay, checking on the baby. And then it was, you guys got to go.
Yeah, yeah. On top of that, the fact that you had just moved and
Right.
all these other things, and we still really didn't know what was going on with COVID fully, and new
Yeah.
strains were popping up. And so, Lisette, tell me about that time for you, like at that part of your birth story. Like after you go in, you were there for the birth, right, Chris? Were you there for
I
the birth?
was, yes.
Okay. And then, now you've got this beautiful little girl. And I remember that feeling. I think that most moms can remember that feeling of just like being in the hospital for a couple of days and then they're saying, okay, it's time to go home. Like I don't know what to do with this little person, right? And so tell me about like how were you feeling during that part of your story when your little one is here, it's time to go home, and all this other sounds like some other things that happened with your pregnancy too, and now you're going home. How were you feeling?
I was feeling, happy to go home because I felt like I could protect her at home better than like in a hospital setting. But I also felt like I was not ready to be sent on my way by myself, because support looks different with the pandemic. So it's not like we were going to have a bunch of family here to help us. We're very fortunate that my mother-in-law, his mom, made us meals and was there for us, and was wearing a mask and everything. And so we just had, just two people trusted, my mother-in-law and my sister. But other than that, like, everyone was concerned about COVID too. So it's like, they offered as much help as they could. And so it was difficult to not have the support and resources that I feel like we thought we would have, but we didn't because of the pandemic. And it was really scary to take this little person home and be like, okay, I have to protect you from the world, but oh, now there's COVID too, like I have to protect you from that too.
Yeah. I know you talked about like about 6 months after um, Sybil came into the world that you started you feeling like these bouts of rage. Was that the first thing you noticed? Did you notice anything before that where you weren't quite feeling yourself?
Yeah, so I think when I was struggling with breastfeeding, I think I tried for 6 weeks and then I gave it up, and weaned off, but I weaned off really quickly. Like I just wanted to be over and done with. I had no idea that weaning so fast could help or like could actually exacerbate, symptoms that I was already feeling. So during the time, I think maybe it was like about 3 weeks postpartum, I noticed that I was crying a lot, and I was really emotional. And everyone kept saying, it's the hormones, and just kind of, minimizing it that way. But I knew that I was off because I was having some perinatal OCD compulsions. And I was doing, like, I would have a thought, an intrusive thought, and then I would try to do something to try to get rid of that thought. And there were a lot of intrusive thoughts that I was having that I never experienced anything like that. And so I knew something was off, but I just kept trying to do something to just get rid of that negative thought. And he didn't know about it because I did not tell him about it, because I thought, you know, a lot of times I feel like women of color, if we like say that, you know, we're experiencing a certain way as a mother, I feel like we get judged, and I was worried that, like, oh my gosh, if I say something, like, are they going to take her away from me? Where's she going to go? Like, I thought that.
Yes.
So that's why, like, even though I fully love you and I fully trust you, like, I was not able to share those intrusive thoughts with him and tell him what was going on. I would just have these compulsions. And he wasn't really like understanding that they were compulsions. He just thought that I wanted things a certain way, and, you know, I was being nitpicky about things. So yeah, that's kind of when I realized that like something was up, and I tried to push it away as much as I
I'm
could.
so glad you said that piece about sometimes why we don't speak up, right? When we're feeling like something is off, or we have questions, or even confessing to your partner, like, I'm feeling the compulsion to do this. Because a lot of times, right, the consequences could be different for us, right? Like, we, at least that's how we conceive of it in our minds, right? That if this gets out, that, you know, we don't get the benefit of the doubt, right? Besides the fact that your providers, you know, you later find out that they were dismissing some of the things you were feeling anyway. So I can, yeah, I'm so glad you named that, Lisette. But I want to know from Chris, like, were you noticing any of these things? Was it just kind of like, okay, maybe she's just in new mommy mode and this comes with that? Or what were you thinking?
I think during that whole time, my mind was like so focused on, like, it's like Lisa had mentioned, that like we're trying to keep this little girl, you know, safe, right? We're trying to keep her alive. We're trying to, like, and it's during like the hardest time of like sleep deprivation and things like that.
Right.
Like, you're not, I,
Mhm.
and for myself, is I wasn't as fully, you know, attentive as I should have been to her, to how Lisette was feeling and how and what she was going through. And I think there are times where we talked about it where it's just like I just didn't notice it, or I knew she was angry or she was mad, or we would, you know, have discussions about, like, you know, things that were going on, and it was just like, you know, you know, you never just don't put two and two together, because we hadn't had proper training when it comes to understanding postpartum depression or the symptoms, right? Like, I didn't know anything about them. You know, everybody calls it, oh, you're just going through the baby blues. And I don't like the term, because I feel like it minimalizes what people are going through. And, you know,
Yeah,
it just says, it's like a push away and saying, like, oh, you're just doing, this is how it is right now. It's like that for everybody. And it's like, if
yeah,
it's like that for everybody, then we should talk about it, right?
right.
We shouldn't just like sweep it under the rug and just say this is what this is. And so, you know, thankfully, you know, it was a lot of months of hard, like, you know, things just not clicking with, like, you know, Lisette trying to get, you know, help for herself, because she was actively trying to get this help. And I didn't know what was going on at the time. I was kind of just like, you know, I reference it as like almost like a racehorse with blinders on. I can only see what's in front of me. I can't see uh, you know, everything around me at this time. And, you know, I still hold that, and I feel terrible that I didn't notice that in her during that time.
Yeah. But also, Chris, but also, you know, to give yourself a little bit of grace, tell us about what was going on with you, and like in terms of like how you were feeling, and what you came to later find out may have been, you know, some perinatal mental health distress there. Like, what were you feeling? What was going on with you? You said
Yeah,
like a racehorse with blinders on.
yeah. You know, I already, as a person, I have ADHD. I'm very, like, you know, my mind is very sporadic already, which Lisa can attest to. So I already have that, but there was so much anxiety. And I grew up as a child, like, I was a very happy-go-lucky. Like, I don't have anxiety, I don't have rage, I don't have like this aggression in me at all. Like, and those slowly started to come out. and my anxiety, depression, rage, all of these things started to come up. And Lisette pointed out to me that she's like, "That's not you. This is not who you are." And so thankfully, and this is why I always say that you say this a lot, is that PSI saved our lives because it helped us understand what was going on. Like, and then you're starting to learn that other people, dads, moms, partners, are all going through these things as well. And so um yeah, so for the 6 months that she was unfortunately going through that, I started to get my symptoms as well. It was extremely, that first 6 months was very, very tough for us.
Yeah, but I think you have to give yourself more credit because, as I was experiencing my symptoms, he was really, trying his hardest to be a really involved parent and to be as helpful and supportive as he could be. And so I say, like, I'm not mad at him for not recognizing my symptoms. Like, I think I had a little bit of resentment at the time, but now it's just like, how could we know? We didn't know that there was something called perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. It was nothing that we learned about.
Right.
And I think it's great, and I'm sorry I have to do a shameless plug here, but I think it's great that PSI now offers a postpartum planning class.
Yeah.
Because the entire mood and anxiety disorders and risk factors are discussed in that class. And if we had taken that instead of a childbirth class, I feel like we could have been set up for so much more support. We would have had an idea, we would have recognized symptoms, jumped on it, gotten help, and it wouldn't have been this horrible feeling of having to navigate all of this at the scrambles and being like, I don't know what to do, we don't have resources, and all that. But I think which is kind of interesting, I think this happens in some other couples, but once I learned that, because I experience perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, he's 50% at higher risk to also experience one. And then also, like, when I started to feel better, his symptoms really started to come out. And that's where, we encouraged and we talked about making sure he got help too.
Yeah, I love that. So why is this? I know that you all, and thank you for sharing your journeys and your stories, and we'll talk a little bit more about like how you got to PSI. But why is this? Why is it important for you to be on with me today to talk about your experiences? Why is perinatal mental health like important to you all?
Do you want to go first? You go first.
I think it's important to me because for me, having I'm a Latina, so coming from Latin America family, I'm a first generation. So I was born here. My mother's from El Salvador, my father's from Mexico, and so in the Latino community or Latinx community, there's a huge stigma about mental health. No one wants to talk about it, and a lot of times spirituality is kind of like, if you pray more enough, it'll go away and all that. And I think spirituality is great, but I think this is just a very real thing, and it's something that you can't see. It's an illness that you can't see. It's in my brain. It's something you can't see. And I think that's kind of why I'm like an advocate. I post about it. I have a whole social media page where I shared, my journey, even like my therapy, sessions. I would do like a recap. And I'm just very open about it because I just want to destigmatize it. I just want to normalize it, because I know that that's how my, cultural community sees it, as it's not something real. Just push it aside. You'll be fine. And I think that has a lot to do with kind of just, potentially discrimination and, underlying racism and all that. And I think it's kind of the same for you, right? With your cultural background.
Yeah. I mean, as coming from as a man, society tells us that we're not supposed to have feelings, that we're supposed to be, this provider that is strong, is, nothing phases us, and we, march through life, and we're the disciplinarian. We're this heroic, stoic figure, right? And the truth is, yes, we are all of that, but not just fathers, but mothers are that as well. But for men, we're taught early that you don't share your feelings, you don't cry, you don't do something that's out of the ordinary of the characteristics that men go through. And that's just not the case. Like, we're all human beings, we all feel. and to hold and suppress those. There's so much generational trauma that happens and
Yes.
that's passed down that we forget that, like, it's just okay to talk about how you're feeling. Like no one judges you if you say, like, hey, I'm having a bad day, I'm mentally stressed, I'm mentally tired. Like,
Mhm.
we all face these things, and by not sharing them, we're suppressing a lot of this, and we're showing our children that, you know, it's okay not to share your feelings. Like, we are very adamant with our daughter Sybil. We want her to have big feelings, we want her to share them, we want her to express herself, right? We don't want her to hold anything back, because that's how we grow as people, is understanding, learning, and, you know, pushing ourselves forward into this, you know, new era of, like, understanding mental health.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that Sybil has a dad who is advocating for that, you know,
Oh
as
yeah.
well. So that becomes like a normalized thing is if she grows up to have, you know, male partners and male friends, that she'll understand,
Yeah.
right? That this is something that, you know, this is a healthy way to be, right? And contrary to what, you know, hopefully society is shifting in that direction even slowly, so by the time she's, you know, a little bit older it'll be different. But contrary to what we are being taught and we have been taught right up to
Exactly.
now, right, it's great that she has you as that model. So talk about how did you land in the role, going from seeking help from PSI, Chris, how did you land in the role of leading the
Mhm.
support group for dads, and what kind of stuff do you guys do in the dad support group?
Yeah. So as a self figure, you know, I was very fortunate, and something that I share with the dads that joined my group is, and this was Lisette had suggested this, is I actually went to some of the parent support groups for
Okay.
PMADs, and it opened up my eyes, because, you know, a lot of these groups are, you know, mother, you know, I'll say mother dominant, which is great though, because for me as a father coming in and not understanding, you know, Lisette was, you know, we would talk about it, and, you know, she would break things down, but for me, more stories, more understandings, more, you know, conversations. And so I would join a lot of the other groups that I could join, for parents, and I would just listen, and I would ask questions, and they would ask me questions, and they want more dads and more partners to go to those meetings, like, because
Mhm.
you know, the more perspectives, the more we understand about each other. And so it started off there, and one of the support group leaders, they had asked me, oh, you know, I think you would be really great at, you know, being a group facilitator. And so I said, oh, sure, I don't mind talking, like, I can talk to anybody about anything really. And so, you know, I reached out, and, you know, thankfully, you know, I talked with, you know, the coordinators, and yeah, they kind of just like asked me questions about, like, hey, would you be interested in running another dad's group? And I was like, absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
I not even a second thought about it. You know, in our groups, they're not much different than some of the other groups. We talk a lot about, you know, it's a safe space. There's no judgment. You know,
Hmm.
it's a judgment-free zone, and a lot of the time, the dads, you know, they want to talk about, like, how they're feeling, because they know that, like, there are people in their lives that they don't relate to it. Their friends can't relate to them, or they're not sharing their feelings, and so a lot of it is a venting, you know, for dads to get things off their chest. Um, Ask questions, you know, seek more information. And because that's really what it is for dads, there's not a lot of information on postpartum depression. And so the only way we can do that is by talking with each other and passing it verbally to each other, and
Yes.
understanding it from our own stories, which I think is an amazing thing, because, you know, we have a lot of new dads who come in for their first time, and they sit and they listen, and they say, you know, countless times I've heard this, is they say, I thought I was the only one going through this.
Hmm.
And I can see there's a room full of men that are also going through something, you know, similar. Like, our journeys are all intertwined through the same thing. And, you know, it's great that there's a lot of new studies coming out about mental health, and especially in dads, and especially in, you know, people of color and things like that. So it's exciting to get a lot of these dads coming into our groups now.
That's great. How many dads show up for your groups on average?
Average, I'd say about between 7 to 9.
Okay.
If we're lucky, we get some good groups where we have like 16 dads in there, and you
Yeah,
and so even just having, even if we had an average of 3 dads in there, that's an amazing
that
turn.
is amazing. That
Like,
is amazing to have men being and having a space where they can be vulnerable and open.
yeah,
And do you have to have been diagnosed with the mood disorder or perinatal mood disorder in order to come to the groups?
no,
Or
I think
like,
as long as you're a dad that, if you fit within the requirement of like from like
Newborn.
pregnancy to 2 years, 2 years
Yes.
old, because we also have a 2+ group, but our dads are usually like newborn to about, I'd say 9 to 10 months is
okay.
usually the average of our
Attendees.
groups. Yeah, attendees. Thank you.
And so, Lisette, how did you go from being a help seeker to volunteer and now working for PSI? Like, tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so I was still kind of attending support groups in early 2022, so last year. But I was feeling a lot better and just like I kept going to groups because I knew at some point I did want to be a facilitator because it was those support groups were so vital to my recovery that I had therapy, but these were just different. And peer support was just so magic to me, you know, recovering very well. And so I knew I wanted to give back at some point. And so I was attending groups and just kind of validating some of the newer postpartum folks and just being like, yeah, like just offering that sympathetic ear and being like, it does get better. And so like I would always say, like, I keep coming to these groups because I want people to see that it does get better and that, I still need a little bit of support. I'm still recovering, but it, like, I remember I was in your place. And so because I would like offer that validation in groups, I'm sure a couple of facilitators kind of were like, oh, she'd be a great, future facilitator, because that's what I do now when I'm leading support groups. And so Megan, the support groups program manager, she kind of approached me in one group and said like, hey, like, would you want to ever be a facilitator at some point? And I'm thinking of launching a Latinx group and I think you would be great. And so that's kind of like how she reached out to me, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, like I would love to. And so it's like I knew I could do the application to become a volunteer, but I wasn't sure if I was ready. And so just her encouragement, Megan's encouragement to apply and be a support group leader, that really helped me see like, oh wow, like I'm ready to do this. I'm on this journey. And then she also found like needed an assistant, and so there was a job position. Can't even talk. A job position with PSI, and so she asked me if I would like to apply for the position. So I applied, I interviewed, and everything like that. And I was worried because I was like, I have no mental health background. Like I have veterinary medicine as my professional experience, healthcare in my professional experience. And so I was like, am I going to be able to do this? And so she really encouraged me, was like, lived experience is so valid in this position. And, just having Megan's encouragement, and even Talia, who's the assistant manager for the program, like both of them have just really encouraged me to just be on this trajectory where I'm just like so
Yay,
into
Megan.
PSI.
Yeah.
We are so blessed to have both of you here, um, and to have you on PSI's team and to continue to do the work that you're doing for all of our families. But I know in particular for our families, moms, birthing people, dads, male partners of color, that it means a great deal to see someone who looks like you, being able to share and make space to be vulnerable about, about your experiences. So if you guys could say anything to a couple, or even to an individual mom, Lisette, or dad, Chris, about that feel like they might be struggling through perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. The thing I didn't ask, but I think you kind of alluded to, is about how it may have affected your relationship, right? But if you could say anything to couples that might be watching or watch this in the replay um, about your struggle about what, speak to them right now and tell them what you would have wanted to know when Sybil was born, about PMDs.
I wish I knew that there was more than just depression. I wish I knew that there was a whole spectrum of, about 6, 7 disorders out there, and that I was educated on the symptoms to look out for. I also wish I knew what I already had like a bunch of check marks because of my risk factors. So just, especially the big move that we had,
Mm,
and on top of the pregnancy and the pandemic, like those are so many risk factors that were just going to put me there to experience a disorder. So I wish I knew all of that information before, because knowledge is power. Knowing that stuff kind of ahead of time, I feel like it'll kind of helps your brain know like, oh, something's up. But I would love to say to the couples out there that, especially to the dads, because I've seen, Chris's side of things, to the dads that they deserve support and they need support too. But that their partner, the birthing person, is not, unfortunately, not the person to support them because they're going through a whole slew of their own hormonal shifts and everything else that they could be experiencing. So I just like to tell the dads that they deserve support too, and there is support out there. Anything you want to add?
I would say, fear is a very crippling thing, and don't be afraid to say something. Communication, I always say this in, my professional and in my personal life. Communication is the easiest and the hardest thing to do
mm,
in anything. And, being able to communicate with each other, or communicate with people outside of just yourself and your partner is very key to understanding, post postpartum depression. So please don't be afraid to talk to somebody. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable with somebody.
mhm.
I would say 99.99% of people want to help you.
Yeah.
There is a huge community that is willing to sit and talk and be there for you. You know, and even outside of PSI, there's a PSI Facebook group for dads. We started a WhatsApp chat for dads. Through the groups, the dads want to continue talking with each other and supporting each other. So there is a huge support system for you. Don't be afraid to show your vulnerable side.
Yeah, I love that. And a couple of things that you all have said. One, I think the experience of being dismissed by your providers,
Yeah,
right? Like your OBs, your pediatricians, and other folks who are supposed to be screening for these things as you go in. And I'm quite sure that most don't screen with the dads about
right.
those things, right? Um, but it's what's remarkable about your story is that, let's say that you are like, I know that there's something wrong with me. And so, not to let people, even people who are supposed to have the knowledge and expertise, dismiss you if you feel like something is not going right. And the other thing is that it will get better,
Yeah.
right? Right? You can get better. So how are you all doing today? How are
We
things going with you all today?
Yeah, we are in a much better place. We both have therapists.
Yep.
I see a psychiatrist for medication management, and I like that's something that I was kind of against being on medication for whatever reason. Might be a cultural thing that like not trusting medication, but now I'm just like, you know what, I have to take this medication because I equate it to needing glasses for my brain, right? So the medication is my glasses for my brain. So I need that. I'm not going to squint for the rest of my life. And so we're in a much better place. We both are open to therapy, not necessarily couples therapy, but I'm sure we could do it at
We
some
could.
point.
We
We
would.
would be
We
open
would
to
rock
it.
it. It would be. The therapist would probably look at us and go, "Why are you guys here?" Because we talk every day, and there something that we learned through our journey was, when you're asking somebody, "How are you doing?" and they answer, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm doing good. I'm tired." But we always ask each other afterwards, like, "How are you really doing? How are
That's
you doing
right.
mentally?" You know,
Yeah.
we learned, like, you know, we take walks with each other. You know, when we're taking Sybil out for her daily stroll, you know, we talk while we're walking. You know, we interact with her and our set, and we talk to each other. And you know, that is one way for us to start our. That was one way that we started our healing journey, was,
Yeah.
you know, being able to communicate. Like I said earlier, is the really the biggest key of talking to each other, and, like, you know, giving each other grace and giving each other space, and,
I love it.
you know, communication.
I love it. Yeah, that's the other thing you said, Chris, that communication is key. So
Yeah.
communication with your providers, communication with your partners, and communication like in reaching out to folks who you said they're 99% of people want to help.
Yeah.
And you're both fortunate. Um, and I love the way you supported one another in your healing, right? Like you encourage one another, you know, that said, I'm learning some stuff. I think I'm recognizing some things. Let me go back and tell my husband, like maybe he wants to check this out, right? Um, and so that there's no shame in this. I think that as we're coming upon Maternal Mental Health Month, which is going to be a big month for PSI, right? Starting on Monday, the month of May, and it's mental health month for people of color too,
Mm.
right? And so as we're coming upon that, like I just want to put that message out there that there is no shame, and that healing starts with help, and that we are here to help you. And so I want to thank Chris and Lisette Rose for joining me this afternoon. You'll see at the bottom of the screen the PSI helpline is scrolling on and the maternal mental health hotline. You see the number for that scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And in crisis, if you feel like you are in crisis and you are in immediate danger, you feel like you don't know what you can do, and you don't know if you're going to be able to be here much longer, please just 988. Pick up your phone and press those three numbers, and somebody is here to help you. The
Mhm.
helpline, the hotline, 24 hours a day, and these are open for birthing people, mothers, if you're pregnant, if you've recently delivered, but also for family members, including dads and partners. Please, we have somebody that is, and then PSI has resources locally that they can connect you to, so that you can get the help that you need. We want you to know that healing starts with help.
Mhm.
I am so thankful to the first couple of PSI,
A lot of questions.
Chris and Lisette Rose, for joining us this afternoon. This was still morning where you are, just for a little bit longer. But thank you all so much. And we will see you guys May 11th for our special Lunch and Learn, Coloring the Conversation with some Indigenous providers. And so we're really looking forward to that. Thank you, Chris and Lisette.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you.